Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Glacier Book Club. My name is Gracie Vergala, and I am the Executive Engagement Specialist for the Glacier Conservancy. And I have the very exciting job of being your host tonight. I'm joined by my amazing coworkers, Amy and Andrew, who will be helping with technology and monitoring the chat, making sure I look good. As I prepared for the conversation tonight, I felt it important to acknowledge the historical context of colonization of the lands that many of us are calling in from, and the people that have lived in the areas we call home since time immemorial. Indigenous history is crucial to understanding all history, yet often remains untold by mainstream historians and from Native perspectives, which is why this book, which we'll be talking about tonight, The Lost Journals of Sacajewea, is so important. I feel so honored to have renowned author Debra Magpie Earling with us here tonight to discuss the book. It's going to be a great program. We're giving away this Black Bear plush, and I've got lots of questions for our author. But as you know, we love hearing from our book clubbers, so please start throwing your questions in the chat. Debra Magpie Earling is the brilliant author of the Lost Journals of Sacajewea and Permaread. She has received a National Endowment for the Arts Grant, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Montana Book Award, and the American Book Award. She is Bitterroot Salish. At a very young age, she became the first public defender in the tribal justice system for the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana. She's a University of Washington graduate and holds a master's in English and a master's in fiction writing from Cornell University. She was a faculty member at the University of Montana in Missoula and was the first Native American director for UM's creative writing program. She retired from the University of Montana, where she was named Professor Emeritus in 2021 and recently received an honorary doctorate from the university. And she's, of course, an Emeritus Glacier Book Club guest, where last time she joined us and we discussed Permaread. And I think that call was just a little before she won the American Book Award for this book, which we'll be talking about tonight. Debra, I feel so honored to be able to talk to you about this amazing book. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here and welcome everyone. Thank you for reading for reading the Lost Journals of Sacajewea and for being here this evening.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful read, and we'll dive into it quite a bit here. But I want to start off by talking about how you made the decision to write this book. It's a bit different than Permaread in that Permaread is this deeply personal kind of story connected to your personal history. Well, Lost Journals here is the untold story of this widely memorialized person in American history. Did deciding to write this book feel different than deciding to write Permaread?
This book was just totally unexpected, I think. I was originally asked to address these Native artists who had done some artwork for the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark Lewis and Clark journey, and so I didn't know anything about writing about art, and so here in Missoula, they told me, well, you can write anything you want, like really anything. And I was really at a loss until I sat down and I began writing, and something just clicked with me. And this was in like 2009. I just started writing, or maybe 2000, when was it? 2007. I just started writing, and I wrote this pretty short book that came out through Peter Koch Publishing, and so it's an independent book arts press, and it's a beautiful book that we put together. And I don't know. And then after I retired from the University of Montana, I realized I needed a project, so I just pitched this book idea, and I got myself kind of in trouble because I said I would get it done in 6 months. So I had little pieces here and there, and I had the remarkable and extraordinary experience of just something hit me, and I allowed myself to write this novel in the peculiar way that it appears. kind of a truncated voice, a voice that's down to the bones. So I was inspired by my mentor and my teacher, James Welch. And so he, when he wrote Fool's Crow, he has, it takes a while to get into that book as well because, an owl is described as ears far apart. And, he uses the original kind of translation of language into of Blackfeet into English. And so the words are become simple, and yet when they're presented in that way, um, they become kind of extraordinary. They reveal the world in a way that it would be like if we were to be able to look at, someone's heart or the bones of a structure, and that's kind of how I approached it. But it was an astonishing journey, and I have to say that some of the language is really raw, and I just allowed it to be. Um, it also occurred to me that Sacagawea spoke many languages, and as a young girl, she was stolen from her people, and she was taken far away. And I just think of all of the languages in Amanda and Camp that she was exposed to, that she had to understand what was being said. And I have no doubt that when she was sold to Charbonneau, that she had to learn his language, even though she didn't let on that she knew what he was saying. I also think that she must have known how not only to speak French, but any of the languages that she encountered. She was a young woman, and and it it behooved her to know the language. It was her life and her child's life. So I think she really um, she understood English. But what surprises me is that many of the historians, will say like she didn't speak English, and I thought, oh, that is crazy. That's like
Yeah.
that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, she was so young, you would think that she would definitely pick up some of the language.
Yeah. And then when she gets back to Three Forks and she gets back to her own people, she communicates very clearly what she wants. When she is turned down by the man that was to marry her, she makes it very clear that she wants to go to the ocean and she wants to see the ocean and she wants to see whales. And she gets that across. And I just love that. She becomes a sovereign woman.
Yeah, I thought that was such an amazing point. And you kind of were alluding to this a little bit, but I want to dive a little more into deciding to tell the story this way because the book starts with this note to the reader and these rules about how the story will be told and says, communication is Sacagawea's hold on the instinctual, which I would love just thinking about it that way. But did you ever try to write it in a different way, or did this just feel like the way that the story had
It
to be told?
never came out in any way other than that particular voice. Um, it became very much like you said, an essential voice, uh, kind of a driven and a like expectant and kind of breathless voice at times. Um, and as she begins to understand more of, becomes more accustomed to being, an independent woman, even though she's with Charbonneau, um, her language begins to deepen and her ability to express herself grows.
Yeah, actually felt like it kind of reminded me of my first exposure to reading Shakespeare plays in school and having to really slow down to just process what's happening. And I also found that it helped that I had to slow down because, this is a story filled with different tragedies and some really kind of hard things to read. And then kind of preparing for book club, I found interview of yours where you said you can take your reader to hell if you give them handholds to make the descent, which made me kind of wonder, did you feel like this story helped function as handholds, or did it just kind of work out that way?
Well, I think in this particular story, I think that the story of Sacagawea has been beautified and has been told through the colonizer's perspective for so long um, that it kind of gutted her in some way. Um, she becomes not herself. She becomes invisible and erased by the power of Lewis and Clark's journals, and they were, extraordinary. But if you sit with the journals, and they're, not an easy read in themselves, they're difficult. If you sit with the journals and you start to look beyond the, like between the lines, she is present at, when she appears, then she is present in all of those situations. And so it was really important to me that her voice be immediate and her voice be one that doesn't pull any punches because she is trying to survive. So I know it's a brutal book. I've been told by many people that it's really difficult to read, and I'm hoping that people will kind of understand that what it must have been like to be, a stolen sister, taken far from your people, and um, you know, uh, and I think about some of the, how frightening it must have been for her at times, and so the language becomes really raw and shows that kind of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's necessary, and it feels like you really just were using words as a powerful tool and the language as a powerful tool. And as you mentioned, how she was kind of a stolen sister here, and you dedicated the books to the stolen sisters of all Native nations. And as I was preparing for this, I thought it fitting that our book club is in May, and earlier this month, May 5th, is the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And I was reading the dedication and just thinking with that and like sitting with the weight of the story. And I was wondering how it felt for you. You wrote this in 6 months. That's so quick, and like how that felt to be sitting with the weight of that story.
Um, You know what? Here's something that I think is interesting and wonderful about the power of writing. And I am always so interested in the world itself that, when you're writing and you're working on something, you enter the world itself. So for me, there was almost kind of a wonder that appeared as I was like there was times when I would enter this and I felt like I was in this place, and she is not without humor the way that she sees things. Even though things get dark, she still has just a unique way of seeing things. And at the beginning of her journey, when she is still at Three Forks, she is she's kind of um, the world is moving really slowly. She's aware of all these things. I mean, the world that surrounds her is really just, a world of survival, but how to gather things, how to live in a community, how to recognize who might not wish her well, how to be a young woman navigating all of these interesting and important things. So for me, there were times when I would finish something, and even if it was really dark, and I know this sounds horrible, but I would feel giddy. I would get off, I'd feel this kind of like, oh my God, and there were times when I used some words that are definitely not words that you use in at any time really, maybe in women's company. But I use those words. I remember sitting there, I thought, they're not going to let me get away with this, but I'm going to do it anyways. I tried to erase it, and then it just kept coming back. And I said, okay, that's the title of this chapter then. And so, but I have to say, writing is to me such a thrilling thing to do. And I'm going to say this, and I'm probably talking too long on this point, but when I taught at the University of Montana, One of the things that I noticed was a lot of the visiting writers, and a lot of the males, and even when I went to Cornell and as a graduate student, one of the things that I kept hearing over and over and over again is how difficult writing is and how, like, you have to sit down and the blood will form on your forehead. I think there's or you cut a vein. Writing isn't difficult as you cut a vein. I think is it Chekhov who says like even a book is like taking an axe to the frozen sea and so I just thought all of these violent kinds of ways into stories and storytelling, and I thought that writing is one of the most pleasurable things in the world. And if you love language and you love to toy around with like how to make a sentence work so that people see it, where it rises up on the page, that is like extraordinary. What a gift. I just always, whenever I'm writing, I'm not the person who's like struggling to write and it's so hard. I just think it's such an amazing kind of universal gift.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the use of language in the book, you can tell, it almost felt like it just seemed fun probably to write because you're using language so creatively. And I remember, I think after reading the portion, The Sacred Earth Dreams in Me, that portion just like scribbling down like this is poetry. And I just thought it was really brilliantly done and exciting. And yeah. I'm gonna have a few more questions and then I'll let Amy start doing some of the audience questions here. But I also want to let everyone know that Deborah is graciously agreeing to sign book plates. So if you want one of those, go ahead and email us at info@glacier.org and we'll make sure to get you a book plate from Deborah here. Um, you also said you would be willing to do a reading for us tonight. So if uh, I'll ask you maybe one more question, and then if you wanted to do a reading, we can do that. But I was moved at this portion near sort of the end of the book when the character Old Woman tells Sacagawea, stories are not always remembered the way they happened, and then it continues this kind of beautiful moment. And that sentiment feels core to why this book is so important. But can you speak and think through some of the significance of imagining Sacagawea hearing that near the end of her own journey, or our journey with her in the story?
Um, that's there's some lovely things that happen in writing, and the woman who has always lived is one of the most surprising characters I have ever um, had the pleasure of working with, or the honor of working with. She appeared to me years before I wrote the Lost Journals. I just had this image of this woman who was wearing really worn buckskin, and that she was blind, and she would ask for the warriors to bring her mirrors as gifts whenever like the traders would come through. So she had mirrors all over her gown, and she would ask the women to put mirrors all along the river close to where people came upstream so she could see them in her mind. So this woman was just this like wise woman that seemed to just come out of not my imagination but some other place. And then I had someone say, you should and then I thought I better really read up on this. And I discovered that the Mandans have a woman who is a sky woman, and she is known as the woman who never died. And I didn't study the Mandan, and I could not, and then I went back and I thought, well, maybe I should change it. I have one place where I honor that story, and I have the woman who never died, what they call her. But for the most part, she is always, I kept trying to change that name, and she wouldn't like the story wouldn't come unless I use the woman who has always lived. And it was like she was telling me, I am alive. I am always alive. I am the woman who has always lived. And so to walk with her in your vision is like extraordinary. And probably one of the saddest things was when I closed the book and she takes Sacagawea to the edge and says, "This is what, this is what you have brought. Look and see behind you. This is the world. Um, this is what will happen with colonialism." And so um, it just felt like such an amazing thing. And I have to say, I'm just so astonished that no one wrote about this before. Like no one thought that Sacagawea would be troubled and that um, her life would be really awful. I mean, I can't believe that no one thought, well, a young woman, really young, I think she was 12 or 13, traveling with a group of randy men, and they were randy whenever they stopped. Lewis and Clark had to kind of rein them in. She had to sleep in the same tent that they did. Uh, and if you read the journals, and I really, if you want to write the journals of Lewis and Clark, they're extraordinary. The amazing things that happen and the little tiny pieces of things that happen are just there are some supernatural things that they caught, and I thought, man, there's a book in there for, I think they encountered Sasquatch. And I think they're warned against like going in the mountains. It's it's just fun to all the things that they don't want to talk about really, and yet they find themselves talking about, oh my God, is this an enchanted land? What's going on here? So
Yeah, that's such a kind of po poetic story for this woman to keep appearing to you, and then you can't write about her if you're not calling her the name
yeah,
that you introduced, and then um, it parallels like their experience with these spiritual experiences they're not necessarily wanting to write about, but they have to because it's like these amazing things are happening all around them.
yeah, I thought when I wrote the piece, if there were only one story or one way of seeing things, all stories would die. And I thought that was a gift that I had was received from her. So, really some wonderful moments that I had with that book where I felt like I stepped into another world that embraced me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Did you want to read us anything
Oh,
here?
sure. Um, this is from Night of Too Soon Dark. And I was fascinated with the character Bewitchua and how she was how she was kind of mean and how it turns at the end. But I thought I'd read just a little bit. Blue elk threads through quivering grass, warrior quiet, weta quiet. Starlight tips mountain blue, and all become one. River fields and stream shine, and animals shiver, and his black hair all blue. I see his breast smoke like the thinnest strands of silver gut. He stops before me and lifts his torch above my head. I am the fish he catches now. I tatter in light that spills from his neck bone to his ankles. Torchlight, blue elk light, the light of warriors. His body is an arrow, his man push hard against his breechcloth. Ape, drunk with warrior fires, grabs my shoulders. My body is dreaming of men pissing in bushes, he said. She is almost ready for you, blue elk. Bewitchua stands at edges of dark. Her rancid eyes glower at me. She punches me with her eyes. She belches skunk death and bird claw. She counts coup with her coup stick of bone. Puh, she is less than mice chew, Bia tells me.
I love that. So many really interesting characters in the story too. And I really liked how there was some characters where their name evolved based on the way that Sacagawea experienced them or saw them. And I thought that was something really interesting. And the way that she referred to white man and then white men, and that had an evolution as well. And I love the way that what you're referring to someone as could evolve based on your perception of them.
That's really that's good that you caught that. Not many people do because white men are in caps. So anything that is she reveres is in caps. And then she hears the white men talking about women and they become like like diminutive to her, except for the original white men that she met, who she always refers to as a white man.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Well, I'll stop hogging it for a little and turn it over to Amy. I know we have lots of questions in the chat, so I'll let Amy take it away for a little.
Okay, we'll let Gracie stop talking, but Deborah, you have to forge on because this is just so very interesting. So, there have been a lot of questions and comments about the language in the book. And in some ways, I may call on some people to read their questions or comments just because it feels like that maybe they want to speak to you. Terry gave the first comment about language, and I thought the way it was worded was really interesting. Terry, would you be willing to unmute? You don't have to put your face on if you don't want to, but if you want to unmute and talk to Deborah, we'd be up for that. Otherwise, I will read your question, no problem. I'm gonna flip to Terry. Okay, I'm gonna read it. The language in the book is sterling. I love that word that was used. It makes the book live, and I find you a genius with this book. So that was the first question about language. And then I bet Dave Baylor would be willing to unmute. He's a regular here on book club.
A regular what, Amy? So
A regular fabulous book clubber.
thank
That's
you.
what you are.
Well, my comment was that, and I'll read it. I really enjoyed the tale from the outset, but was initially very frustrated by not having a dictionary to understand better what the animals and characters were intended. And then, Shazam! I realized that the author was withholding complete meanings from us, just in the way that Sacajewea was also experiencing hearing words that she didn't understand exactly what they were. And that understanding obviously evolved over time. So I appreciate you giving us her experience there.
Dave, you got that. I'm so glad because the editor kept pushing me to, give a glossary and give a glossary. And I
No.
thought it won't be a real experience if I give a glossary. It won't, I want to throw readers into the kind of I guess, the quagmire of her
Mhm.
own experiences and how that she must have been frustrated so many times by not understanding what people were saying and then having to really think hard and learn learn language and I think it comes fairly quickly that Bia is the mother,
Mhm.
Ape is the father, Weta is the bear. And if it doesn't, by the time like Weta is like the bear that's following her, when it attacks the warrior who rapes her, it becomes, pretty obvious what he is.
I viewed it all as poetry, which conveys words that have a story, but good poetry also conveys the experience of what those words mean too. So I really appreciated that. So
Well, thank you.
thank you. And I
It's
enjoyed the
I
previous
felt a
book also.
poet, but
Yeah.
and I struggle with poetry. I wasn't a good poet, although I'm thinking about taking some poetry classes to learn. Like I'm just not good at hearing how poetry goes, like the
You're
words.
not reading enough poetry then. It goes wherever you want it to go. So thank you very much.
You,
Yeah,
Dave.
and to think that this doesn't seem like poetry to you. I mean the book to me was very poetic. I like Dave's very last sentence of his comment. He said thanks for the total experience, and I think that really sums it up. Okay, let me scroll. A few more have come in since I've since we've been talking, but this is really interesting to me. Jean made a comment, and it was the exact same line that hit me in the book. Like it was the only line that I like underlined in the book. For some reason, it must have hit both of us. But she says one of the paragraphs that hit me as being starkly and sadly true was the last one on page 156. This white man comes up the river to claim. He is not interested in beaver pelts or women. In his eyes, everything he sees is already his. Does that line commonly come up when you talk to people about this book? I just think it's interesting that Jean and I both picked that one out.
I haven't had people say that to me um, directly before, but they do talk about what people seem to talk a lot about is the idea of naming something, of giving
Oh,
things
yeah.
and to going and putting, and we're kind of seeing that, definitely in the White House now, like the desire to put your name on everything, to name something and to claim it and you see how what that does to a sacred landscape or a sacrosanct landscape, what that does to an untouched landscape. When you name everything, you don't allow the thing itself to be. So, so what's kind of, people will ask me about that, about naming certain things or about the relationship between Sacagawea and the men that she was with and how her perception of things, how she sees the world is so different than how they are viewing everything as ownership and something to claim, and they were a military expedition and they were there to just catalog and claim everything, which is kind of it's just kind of astonishing to me. And I think about I do believe my elders about the power of the land itself, the power of, there's things in the landscape. And I'll tell you a story which I think is kind of interesting. One of my former students was telling me after she read this book, she became aware that a plant, she's non-native, and she became aware of like plants and different things. And she said she was sitting with another friend and she said, Look at, we're sitting around these plants and they're sentient, they're aware. Trees are aware that we're here. We live in a world that's alive." And she said, but there was one bush that she goes, "I know this sounds crazy, but this bush was listening to us." And she goes, it put out this kind of energy. And she said, "Do you feel something?" And her friend said, "It's that bush there." And so she said one of their friends came to meet them. They were walking along the river, and they told them they had this bush. And they said, "Can you guess which bush it is?" And she said, he went right to it and said, "It's that one, isn't it?" And I love that idea that somehow in this world we have, and you live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, to go into Glacier and you realize I went to Glacier for the first time in many years, and I noticed like the mountains are so alive and sentient, like them just so powerful and it makes you feel oddly just so much at peace to be in a world where the everything around you is attuned and in tune with things around. It's a beautiful thing. So I kind of went off on that, but
No, that's a wonderful, wonderful story. And I feel like that is what people who visit Glacier come back to, right? Whether it's spiritual or just that sort of powerful feeling. So thank you for sharing that. Um, here's a question from Eric and Tanya. They write, I was struck at how different your use of language is between this book and Perma Red. And how challenging was it for you um, to change how you sort of told the story or wrote, I guess.
Perma Red was a book that I wrote when I was, I began the book when I was really young. and so, I've always had a fascination with language. And this book, when I got into it, I try to occupy the world in which I'm writing from. So Perma Red has so many stories from my family. Like I think it could be nonfiction actually, because most of those stories, like and see some of the outlandish stories in Perma Red are true. So stayed true to the feeling of what it felt like to me to live in Montana and to live on the reservation near Perma. Tried to capture that sense of, that dry dust heat. When I was in the company of the characters in this novel, it felt very rich and alive. And one of the things that I recognized that I had to get over right away was if you're going to portray a character who lived 200 years ago, you have to you have you have to begin to look at the world through how they looked at the world. So liver, like what would be beautiful to someone who was living in a place where they had to survive? Like what would wouldn't be what we think of beautiful today. So liver shine would be beautiful. String gut would be beautiful. Certain smells and the richness of blood and the scent of certain things like would be so potent for us to explain the land that surrounds us and the way in which we interact with others. So I had to keep um, I had to keep coming up with ideas of, what it was like to live in that particular world and how to see things um, without like really metaphor, I guess, or without any language getting in the
Mhm.
way,
Mhm.
trying to get to this thing itself. Um, and it was challenging at times, but if you get to the place where you want to describe, like one of the men will visit our lodge, she says. He hides his true self from others. He comes with shame. He comes with anger. He comes with sodomy. This white man is not one with his own men. He is not one with his self. And I think like that, just breaking it down to say what it is itself, like it's not it's not correct to say he comes with sodomy, but it is. And it carries something. So I tried to think of like in some ways the things these people carry.
Mhm.
So, but the
Really
language,
interesting. In some ways, even though the language was very different, um, and maybe other people felt this too, I sort of had the same emotion. As a reader, I think you're very emotional when you read your two books, and Perma Red was sort of a story of survival as well, for a young woman. So they were similar to me, actually.
yeah. I think I think they, isn't it funny? I was trying to tell my students years ago, it was when you're writing, uh, you'll find your path. You'll find what it is that calls you to write. And, I really feel called to write about powerful women
Mm.
and women who, are under duress and women who have to change to suit their environment. So, the story of the Kootenai Medicine Woman Wire that I'm working on now is, about how this woman wanted to be, she wanted to be a man. She wanted to be a warrior more than anything. I think more than even being a man, she just really wanted to be a warrior. So she has to adapt to that world. And so that her language is kind of is different because she's sees herself as being funny, I guess. So
Mhm.
hopefully I can write something that's a little funny. I don't know, grim but funny.
So that's a little preview for all of you. There's another book coming. Um, So I'm going to ask, or maybe ask Mike to ask one question, and then I'm going to send it back to Gracie, even though I have some more to get to, but I know we'll take a little break, maybe give Deborah a little break and do some other things. So, Mike, would you like to unmute and share your comment?
First of all, it's a joy to talk to you. Really loved the book. I thought it was brilliant creative writing. Um, my comment was that I found how each day of the journal had its own unique imagery, but I especially found the day of York talks to be one of the more powerful entries. And what I didn't put in the comment, but now I'm thinking as a question is, did you find it how, as a writer, to change the tone you did? You could clearly feel that this was a different person talking when York was doing when she was writing York's entry. The language was completely different. And as a writer, maybe you could share some insights into how you approach that.
Thank you for the question. I I felt York's presence so when you read the journals and just the way that he's treated, and Clark is so cruel to him. Um, and you can tell that Clark is jealous of him because everywhere they go, everybody wants to everybody wants to touch him. They get like when Lewis and Clark, they're beautiful. I mean, they come in with their red uniforms and they must have been really a sight to see. But all the people just like push them out of the way so that they could see York, like because they just never seen anything like York. And so that, that's not York's fault that he was a black man traveling with these white men. But one of the things that Clark does to him is at one point they go up to, I want to call it, it's not Devil's Point, but it's just outside of Mandan, and they go up on this peak. And when they come back down, York pats his belly like kind of and says, "You're getting fat," and you know that that's not true. Like you know that he's hefting all this stuff. He's just all muscle. And so when I was, and then I read up on York, and one of the things that really troubled me about his life was, do you know that York, when he returned to Virginia, he sold him to a terrible taskmaster. He sold him into like real bondage. Uh, and then after he was broken by this man, who was like, one of the worst kind of slaveholders, he took him back. And then he set him up in a, what was it? He was running, I forget what he was doing, but he set him up in business and York couldn't do it. York couldn't perform. But the cruelest thing that he did to him was York wanted to see his wife. And so he traveled to see her, and then he was severely punished for seeing her. And I think about, they were kind of raised together, and I kind of wonder what that was like for him. And so when his voice was just broiling or boiling in me, and it just rose up. It was like you couldn't keep a cap on it. It's like he wanted to say, no, and even my editor was saying, well, we might want to cut this because it isn't in her voice. And I said, I can't stop this voice. He is like, he really wants to help her. He really wants to save her. And so I let it be. And when you stop to think about the kinds of things that he was asked to do, how he had to really carry all that heavy desk and all of the things that Clark had, that he had to, endure so much. And he had such dignity. And I wanted him to have a voice because I thought the two of them must have had kind of a constellation of sorrows uh, when they were traveling with the on Lewis and Clark's car. They must have really felt, isolated at times.
Thanks for your question, Mike, and thanks for the answer, Deborah. I'm going to send it back over to Gracie, and Gracie, feel free to send it back to me because we've got a few more comments to get to.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. I know you have to finalize a giveaway winner too for the plush bear. It'll match people's cover of their book as well, so that'll be great. And I thought I'd just give a quick introduction to who we are for any new people to the Glacier Book Club. But at the Glacier Conservancy, we're proud we get to support a lot of different projects in Glacier National Park. Two of which are we're proud to support the bear management and research in Glacier National Park. We love these guys, as well as Native America Speaks, which is the longest running Indigenous Peoples Speakers series in the national park system. So if you'd like to hear more about anything that we do, Andrew's going to send a link in the chat, as well as you all have our email and things. So feel free to reach out, and thank you for joining Glacier Book Club. Lots of fun here. Okay, I have to fulfill my duty because it would not be Glacier Book Club without a little speed round. So I have a quick speed round here for you, Deborah. These are this or that questions. We'll just get into it here. First one I have is the mountains or the river?
The river.
Love it. How about this one? Reread a book you love or rewatch a movie you love?
Oh, that's a toss-up.
It's a hard one to pick.
I would do both.
Yeah, yeah. Useful for different reasons
Do
too,
both.
as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. When you write, do you prefer using a pencil or a pen?
I prefer a pen.
Nice. There's something cathartic about crossing something off instead of erasing it.
Mhm.
A summer evening by the campfire or a winter evening by a fireplace?
Oh man. Uh, Both. How can you choose between such beautiful two beautiful they seem like things in tandem or something. Beautiful
Yeah,
things that you share. I would love to be in both places.
you need them both.
Mhm.
And then I have a little spring wildflower category here. I have the arrowhead balsam root or the glacier lily.
Balsam root.
And what about shooting stars or bitterroot?
Bitterroot.
State flower, there we go. Um, and then I want to talk a little bit about you've talked much about how the journals obviously influenced the book, and the book centers around this historical figure, a real person. And I was wondering how research sort of played a role in preparing to write this book. Did you feel like you had to do a ton of research for it, or did you feel like the story already existed in you?
Um, well, I think it was really important to follow the journals. And I also thought it was really important to find out about the Lemhi Shoshone and the Mandan and the Hidatsa. And so but it was, I do serendipitous research. I'm not a scholar. I guess I am now. I can call myself a scholar because I have a doctorate. But I love to go into a library and I love for things they just find you, don't they? I don't know if you like information that you need will find you. And then I become like a gopher. I'm, looking through all the, I'll find little bits of things here and there. Um, but that whole idea, I try not to let myself get lost in the library because um, I just love the library. But maybe we should get lost in the library more. I'm not opposed to getting lost in the library to do my writing. Um, I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the question. I got lost in the library there.
That was great. Yeah, that was kind of what it was about. And specifically about research, was there any sort of stories or things that you tried to include in the book, but they didn't end up making it for whatever reason?
Well, one of the things that I always thought was interesting, I wanted to really get into the Bigfoot thing because I thought that one that was kind of strange. It just seemed like Bigfoot. But one of the, I wrote this essay for Alvin Josephi. It's called, it was in an anthology, Lewis and Clark Through Indian Eyes. And one of the things that Gerard Baker, who's Mandan, he was, he claims, and many of the Mandan, which is, I don't, I'm not taking sides really. Maybe I am. It seems like well, I don't know whether you know this, but the Mandan and Hidatsis claim Sacagawea was theirs, and it was the Lemhi Shoshone who stole her. Excuse me, I have to take a drink. But you know what? And I'm the person who always believes the tale, the mystical kind of tale, or the and they say that she was sent, there was a wolf that was sent to her, and that she followed this wolf back to her people. Well, that's good. Um, I would have believed that, but I don't buy. Then why is she is such a sacred person to you and such a revered person to you? Why did you give her to Charbonneau? Why was she of all people? Why not one of your own? Because Charbonneau was known for being someone who wasn't good to Native young women. I mean, he just wasn't. He abused her. So I find it like the Lemhi Shoshone have more of a compelling story, but it doesn't matter either way because in the end, Sacagawea, when she went back, finally got back to the Lemhi Shoshone, and her husband turned her, said, I'm not going to marry you because you have a baby with a white man. No. And so what would have happened to her? She had no one. She couldn't, she was just locked. So she said, I'm not I'm not going to stay here, and I am going to see the whales. And I love that about her. I love that independence. And to me, Sacagawea was a sovereign woman. She claimed her own path. And there's so many stories about her. I mean, I would love to, tell the stories. There's later stories where she lived to be a very old woman, that she didn't die at the age of 23, that she had a long life. And the interesting thing is, once I let go of, Sacagawea and I said my goodbyes, I said, okay, Sacagawea, I'm leaving this story now. Because I kept having weird visitations and people coming up to me. And I said, okay, Sacagawea, I got to say goodbye. And so somebody wrote me, this professor at the University of Montana, and said, hey, I have some really old materials that I would like to, it hasn't been published, and it's about Sacagawea. And my great great grandfather was a superintendent, on the Wind River Reservation. Would you like to see this information? And so he brought this like bag it was in his Albertsons plastic bag, and it was this rare manuscript from his great grandfather, who talked about Sacagawea being alive, and it was the story of Sacagawea on the Wind River Reservation. So really interesting. People are going, you've got to write that. You've got to write her story. And finally I said, okay, I'm taking it over to the University of Montana, and it's in their records now. But I thought I've got to go. I've got to go Sacagawea. There's some other stories I have to write. I might circle back around to you years later, but for now, I gotta let her go.
That's amazing. What other historical documents can be delivered to us in Albertson bags?
Isn't that crazy? I was like, this is a rare, these are like some of the it was covered in this kind of really aged, kind of like, I don't know, brown paper sack material, but it was really, really brittle. And I was like, is what is this? And then these old letters when he was a superintendent. I just loved, the one of the things, if any of you are writers, and I assume many of you are who are on this feed, one of the things that's wonderful is, if you have like a historical story that you want to tell, you think that somebody grabs it and then that's the end of it. But there's so many perspectives. Like, I don't think that Lewis and Clark, or I don't think they're journals. I don't think anything has been really explored in it. There is so much interesting stuff in there that you just don't hear about. We kind of hear the kind of big arc of Lewis and Clark, but we don't hear these astonishing stories. So I encourage you, if you're interested in history or you're interested in telling a story, that you find you go in and there's so much to write about. I could write books about Lewis and Clark and the people inhabiting that for like probably the rest of my life, but I got to move on.
Yeah, and I got to make sure that I'm not being selfish of the time here. I know that Amy, I promised we'd send it back to you at least once more. So if you have a couple more questions, and then we can wrap up here where the hour's flying by.
Yeah, Deborah, thanks so much. I think we have like 3 minutes left, 3 or 4 minutes left. But I wanted to like expand on what you just said because Janet made a comment. I think we have two Janets on tonight. So one Janet made a comment. She writes, I grew up with the sanitized for your protection version of the Lewis and Clark and never truly appreciated that they were young men on a long, lonely, probably scary journey. So there's another perspective, right, that maybe we don't always think about. But she also continues and says, probably the biggest gift from your book is the stripping away of the older version and giving us a much more realistic version. So thank you for that. And we have a few of those comments in here. Just, thank you for giving us a different perspective. Oh, and I love this comment from Dave Simmons as well. He was struck his 9-year-old granddaughter is learning about Ohio history, and she was studying for a test and told him about the Battle of Fallen Timbers, which led to a treaty opening up the area for settlement and eventually Ohio statehood. But the other part of the story is, of course, the eviction of the Native Americans from most of Ohio. And your book tells the part of Lewis and Clark that is often overlooked.
Hmm. So I'm
Um,
honored by these readings of that people stuck with it. It's not an easy book, so all of you on this feed, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. You had to struggle with it, I'm certain.
yeah, there's a few comments about that, and some people that maybe gave up, and now after hearing other people's comments, they're going to go back and reread. So you'll have some more fans for sure. I think, maybe this is a good way, a good one to ask. Michelle wanted to know, says that she's intrigued by this story and want to learn more. Do you have any other recommended readings about Sacagawea?
There's a historical book written by Grace Heberd, and she was the woman who actually said that Sacagawea lived, many years after, after the expedition, and didn't die at Fort Manuel. So I would recommend her because it kind of all the historians kind of poo-poo her and she's like really the only at that time the only like woman who's writing about historian, so they just take her to task. So I would definitely want to read more about her. I should have brought this other book. I'll put it in. I'll send it to you because there's one book that I think is really extraordinary and beautiful about Lewis and Clark. So I will, if I can, I'll send that to you, Gracie, that link.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I mean, there's um, countless of more stories to be told and that are untold, and many more things and reasons we could get lost in the library. So we're coming to the end of our time here, but I just want to thank everyone for joining, especially, and thank Deborah for joining us tonight for Glacier Book Club. It's been such an honor to speak with you about this important story and this wonderful book. Let us all continue to move through the world here, ready for our point of view to be challenged and ready to slow down and listen to the world as the book taught us to do. Be kind to your friends, and be kind to yourself and your neighbors. And thank you for joining.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you, Gracie. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you all.